Well, welcome to everybody out there. We're here today with a fantastic gathering of individuals on the outside world and Oksana and myself on the inside world here, Oksana. For those who don't know and haven't met Oksana in the past, Oksana is a longtime friend of Petra and now part of the Petra universe and helping those of us that are here to understand ourselves and our environments better and better. And she's going to take us through today and give us some great insights on burnout and stress, which a lot of us are dealing with both in the pandemic and even outside of that. And I'm really excited, Oksana, to hear a little bit not only about kind of your perspective on these things, but also some of the things you can help us to understand on looking for the signs of when this is occurring. I think one of the things that we all get to is we reach a kind of boiling point and we didn't know we were getting there. So hopefully as we go through today, all of you that are here with us here on Zoom and some of you out in Facebook Live land can gain some knowledge and experience from Oksana. So Oksana, I'm going to turn it over to you to take us away.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everyone who is joining live or watching the replay. It is indeed a very important topic, and this is for anyone who considers themselves high-paced, overachiever, still ultra-productive, especially now in the times of stress. And it's not really about, are you productive right now or not? Are you accomplishing a lot or not? It's more about looking for the signs and looking out for your well-being so you can sustain that productivity without the long-term crash. Unfortunately, many of us have been running on an empty fuel, so to say, and I'm one of those who've been burned out many times in my life, and I didn't know up until it happened. Either you get sick or you just got resentful or you got fatigued and something kind of puts you out of commission. So if you are an overachiever and you say, I'm staying productive and I have good use of my time, still please stay on. I'll share some research tools and interesting perspectives for all of us to take on. So with that being said, always happy to be part of the Petra family and looking forward for our time together. It would be a combination of me using some slides. If you are driving or listening in, you will be getting those slides as a replay, and also we'll be doing some reflections. If you have something to write on, that's amazing. If you just want to reflect and sit down quietly and kind of ask yourself the questions that I'll be asking you, that is wonderful. Q&A, feel free to ask in the Q&A session, and Mark will be helping me to announce those questions, as well as we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So I put this together specifically for this webinar, and there's a lot of interesting facts that I rose my eyebrows when I started to look at it. So I'm looking forward to sharing this with you. So I'm going to share my slide to begin with very quick, and then we'll get going. So you should be seeing my screen, but let me just make it large. So today we're talking about going strong or burning out, because there's really a fine line between this extra productivity where we're going for a long time and we've been going strong and really high stress and high level since March pretty much, and for some people even before that. And so today we'll talk about the understanding of that fine line. Where are we tilting? Because it is there. We'll also talk about how is this fine line related to your emotional state. One of them is what's caused by stress. And I know we've done mental health risk webinar back in April, and we got great feedback. This is new stuff and new information. Things has evolved. And so stick around and we'll share practical tools for the teams and for people individually of looking for those signs and what can we start doing to address these things. So hope this agenda works for you. And I'll be pausing. So Mark, if there are any comments, if there's something that you want to contribute, I'll be making those pauses and we'll make it a conversation. So I'll begin by sharing this quote because it deeply resonated with what burnout represents for me. Burnout is what happens when you try to avoid being human for too long. And I know Petra does not like the word try, but here people are really ignoring all the signs, physical signs, emotional signs of their body, their mind saying, I'm overloaded, stop, let me rest. And we just still keep persevering, persisting. Some entrepreneurs and business owners call it the grind. And therefore, what are these signs? Let's define though what burnout is. And I like the definition of World Health Organization. They actually in 2019, just last year, they insisted on adding it as a classification of disease. And burnout, very important that they only related to chronic workplace stress. Burnout by World Health Organization is not defined of any other context. It's only occupational pressure. So if you have any issues at home or family things, that's not the classification of burnout. We're talking about productivity at work. We're talking about stress at work. And there are three characteristics that World Health Organization gives: is feeling of energy of depletion or exhaustion, that fatigue, that I cannot do it anymore, increased mental distance from one's job, or feelings of negativism or cynicism related to one's job, just kind of saying, oh, they're not even valuing me, and this is all, sorry for my French, a shit show, and things like that. Like all this conversation sometimes that we can say around when we don't agree with the way things are going at work. And then as a result, it is reduced professional efficacy. Our productivity just drops. We are unable to be on top of our games. But there are several things that happens before that. And I would love to, granted this definition, I would love, Leah, if you can fire a poll of how many times throughout your life you could catch yourself having a burnout. Professional setting, you know, having one or two of these characteristics or all three, stress related, prolonged chronic stress. And by the way, the chronic, if it's lasting for several weeks or months, that is already chronic, even if you had interruptions. So do you mind participating in a poll very quick so we kind of can understand? I definitely had 3 to 5. Mark, what about you? We cannot vote, so at least say it out loud.
Yeah, I was saying we can't vote here, but you know, I unfortunately I'm gonna probably say I lost count. You know, in the number of businesses that I've been involved in a run. It's like, you know, I like how you've set it up here where it's business related, but you know, when I attempt to be too human for too long or not really gain my humanity, I can think back to a number of times that I've done that.
Yeah, unfortunately, I actually.
Last couple votes coming in.
Well, Leah, what about you? Have you had the burnouts yet? You were young in your career yet. I think the millennial generation just pushing very hard.
Yeah, I would say this is the first year I've probably experienced some feelings of burnout just pushing through, you know, the really intense COVID period. But again, like you said, I'm pretty early in my career, so we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you don't mind sharing, just to get the lay of the land here. So we have 3 to 5, 1 or 2 more, just yeah, loss count 10%, at least once a year, 20, 3 to 5 altogether, 43%, 1 or 2, no more. No one had none. So pretty much everybody here who is present right now had a burnout at least once. So I guess we're in the right place then, all of us. And I'm sorry to hear that at the same time. You know, it's not a pleasant event to go through. So in fact, this event, and I'll give you just a few numbers, burnout is directly related to stress, and workplace stress expenditures only in the United States are anywhere between 125 to 190 billion dollars per year. And so we really, really need to pay attention, because these are the dollars that coming out of your organizations. These are the dollars that employees are spending on their healthcare, on their sick days off, and unproductive days. In fact, when there was a study, we think about that usually we talk about engagement, especially in HR setting. It's all about how do we engage our people? How do we increase productivity? How do we get their attention and focus? And what is interesting is that burnout is actually more prevalent in the high player environment. The employees that are engaged, they're super engaged, they are motivated to do well inside the organization. These are the people that get burned out more, 1 in 5 of those, versus they usually have high level of interest, but high level of stress and high level of frustration. And as a result, they actually have higher turnover. So your A players, your productivity stars, they actually have higher burnout risks than the ones that are disengaged. The one that is disengaged and just sitting and clocking in, they usually don't have as much of the burnout, something for you to consider. And then the true costs for the burnout, of course, are loss of productivity for organization, for your clients, for the families that are engaged, high turnover, just like we said. Actually, burnout and stress are one of the biggest contributing factors for the turnover. And then loss of best players. These are the people that get impacted. And I know that Petra works, and me, myself, we're working with high achievers. It's like, how do I get the next level? How do I get more productivity in? So very, very interesting to note. I would love to.
Oksana, I was just going to add in on that. I think it's important that, leaders that are on this call, right? I know many people are probably here coming for themselves, but think about your team members. I think you bring up a very valid point, which is a lot of time as leaders, we're like, what can we do for those A players, right? Those high achievers, and being, recognizing that, hey, they could be on pathways to burnout. I love what you said, is those people are the ones that usually do have the burnout. So keeping an eye open for, okay, how can we maybe have discussions around what can we do? And I know you're going to help us with that through this today, but what can we do for those achievers, right? So we don't lose those best players because of burnout.
Absolutely. And yes, this webinar is structured not as much for us as leaders, but how do we help others? How do we help team to persevere? So it's all together, as us as leaders, us as managers, to step in and recognizing that there are people struggling, and they, even though they're productive, does not mean that they're not at risk, is actually the highest risk. So yes, absolutely. Thanks for bringing it up, Mark. We have a picture here of a traffic jam on one side on the right, and pretty much open route and free flow traffic on the left. Which one do you guys prefer? Who usually likes to sit in the traffic? If you don't mind actually chatting, I would love to start incorporating the chat function in here. And also, there's something that I learned, actually, I forgot to use it in the beginning. If you look at the very top, there are 3 buttons. You can actually turn off all your notifications so you can really spend the time and zoom in right now. We're gonna start asking some questions and reflecting. So that could help you to disconnect from whatever you're doing right now behind the screens. So I usually ask this question: nobody loves to sit in traffic. Yet burnout is exactly the worst traffic jam with a catastrophe on the road. As you know, hopefully nobody dies, but sometimes they do. So this is how it is for our nervous system, for our brain, for our emotional regulation, for the whole body that we are having, and for our organization. Because if you are out of commission, that means extra pressure on your team, extra pressure on your leaders. And so this catastrophe and traffic jam that gets created, we're not choosing it, and yet that's what burnout is. And I would say that I would argue that we are choosing it. And I want to ask you a question, and I'll tell you a story. So type for me, if you guys are productive right now and you cannot start working, you're experiencing high levels of stress, you have never enough time to finish everything that you need, there's endless to-do lists, your meetings are back-to-back, that means you do stress. That means that you're choosing it actively. So I want to ask you why. Why are we consciously or unconsciously go again into the traffic jam? We just love being there. So there's some kind of sense of feeling that it gives to you. And while you're typing it in the chat, I'll give you a little story. When I realized that I'm addicted to stress, I was in India at that time after one of my burnouts, super kind of phased out and not understanding why am I stepping in the same pond all the time and getting wet. And I was listening to an addiction expert, Tony Rosen, and he said, he was talking about addictions. And I'm like, I don't have any addictions. I don't drink alcohol. I don't smoke. I don't do anything that is toxic or harmful. And then as he kept defining what addiction is the behavior that you keep doing without ability to stop and it impacting your life in a negative way. It almost hit me in the head like a brick that I was like, I'm addicted to stress. It's a behavior that is negatively impacting me, and yet I'm unable to stop it on demand. I keep engaging in it, and that is my addiction. I just feeling up something with me. So what are the feelings that you are getting? And I'll tell you mine. Actually, I'll ask Mark. Do you, Mark, kind of whenever you were through these burnouts, what were the feelings that you were getting out of stress? Because if you don't get anything, you would stop the behavior. It means that you're benefiting somehow from it. What do you think that was for you?
Yeah, I think on the, when you go to the true feelings, right, you dig underneath and go in. I do think there's a little bit of that fear and guilt, right? It's like, okay, am I doing enough? And so let's pack my schedule. But if I really, it's like, I would say on the surface of it, it's like, oh, I'm being productive. But underneath of it, it's like, oh, am I doing enough, right? Is that, are we good enough? So that fear underneath there is probably something that pushed me to overpack my schedule on a continuous basis.
Yeah, that's a valid one. So for me, it actually was the sense of, if you convert, like, am I doing enough? What it was feeding me is the sense of importance. If I had the packed schedule, then I actually felt like I'm a productive person, that I'm important. It also gave me the sense of significance, that I'm doing something. Like, it's a placeholder and it doesn't really achieve as much as it could, but nevertheless, it feeds my emotion. It gave me the right to exist. Like, what is the purpose for me on this earth? If I don't have packed calendar, means nobody wants me, means I'm worthless, means I don't have the right to exist, and I'm not adding value to anybody. And then it also gave me attention, that desire to be loved, desire to be liked, desire to be around people. It's built in us. And so stress for me, if you convert into what were my needs, was significance, importance, attention, and right to exist. And so I want you guys to think in these terms when we're thinking about, and let me read what you guys wrote in the chat of what is it for you. There is another guilt. Absolutely. We have the feel it is out of control and we have to go to do that direction. It tells us what we're important and needed. Yes, so that sense of importance. Fearful that I'm not doing enough, just like Mark mentioned, absolutely. Feeling like I need to prove my worth, feeling like I'm not doing enough and need to do more. Absolutely. So I would ask you to kind of convert it into how does that feel, that need? So if you're not feeling enough, like you are not enough, and you are stressed and you're producing that busy calendar, does it satisfy that need? Because as long as stress is satisfying any of your needs, you are not going to stop the behavior. The only way is to replace the means with which you satisfy the need. So if you have the need of feeling important and worthy, then as long as you're doing it in a stressful way, it will keep paying off with that. So you need to start flipping of how you're satisfying your needs in order to let go of the behavior. So we'll keep going, but this is something for you to start wrapping up and start taking notes of, okay, how am I doing it? How am I satisfying it? And so we can agree all that we're actually after emotion, that energy, passion, worthiness, strength, productivity, burnout, and as a result of that stress gives us these feelings. It gives us the sense of aliveness. And therefore, I wanted to share with you, and by the way, guys, feel free to ask questions. Mark is monitoring the chat. So does that resonate? Let me pause for just a second. I know I have like a tendency to speak fast and load a lot. So So far, so good. Mark, are you tracing along?
I'm tracing along here with you, and there aren't any chat questions as of yet, but I'm sure people will get in the game here and join us. But I'll let you know if they come up. I'm right with you.
Awesome. So what is the difference between burnout and going strong? Because these are very similar, because I hear a lot of overachievers say, I love my stress, especially New Yorkers. They're like, that's me. This is my identity. I love the grind. I love my stress. And so they did the studies of nurses. There are two different studies. One was in France and one was in Quebec. And they discovered that there are different styles of passion of why we're going into certain projects or things. And one is the obsessive passion. And that is what that leads to the burnout. The obsessive passion characterizes, and again, this is work related only. The work is highly valued. We love what we do. We are excited about it, but it has uncontrollable urge to work. We want to keep going all the time. And as a result, it creates the conflict between the work and life, other activities, not just life, like anything else. It's just work is a priority and we keep going. And then we keep pushing and choosing work when it's risky to do so. These are your pathological gamblers, but here are your workaholics. Right? They know that they're already damaging relationships. Their family screaming out loud, stop, we need you home. The workers saying, take a break, disconnect from your email, and you still keep going. And the majority of it is relation to the work identity, because there's unstable ego. There's some kind of trauma of unworthiness, insecurity, instability in our psychic, in our nervous system, and we are trying to fill up that gap with work. And as a result, we persist, we fight, but it's very rigid. It's just my way or highway, keep going, it hurts, that means it matters, and we avoid all the signal, and that is what results in the burnout. But there is another type of passion that's called harmonious passion that is actually what we would more want in our work environment. Again, we highly value work. We're excited to come to work. We love what we do, but it brings the intrinsic joys, and it accompanied by sense of control, meaning that you can stop on demand. You know that you also have other areas of life, other things that fill you up, and you are able to contribute to work, but at the same time, it's not the whole of you. You're not identifying 100% with what work is. And therefore, you persist and you persevere through challenges, and you push through deadlines, and you achieve the goals, but it's flexible. You know when to push and when to pull. You know when to give it time for the client and not just call them every single day and tell them, are you there yet? Are you there yet? Have you made a decision? But give it space, or concentrate on different projects at a time. You're just very fluid with the process, and you are able to disengage on demand. As a result, you are staying productive consistently, but you are not burning out. You're just consistently and constantly productive, and you're managing it as an equilibrium very well. So I'll stop the screen for now, and I want you to reflect on a few questions, kind of whenever you think back on your burnouts, and we said that at least everyone has it once here. Did you have the intrinsic satisfaction from your work? And kind of just think back on what you have. Or do you feel that you're constantly working to prove things for others, to prove things for yourself? What is the underlying motivation for you? Is it because you just love? Or is it something that I have to prove my self-worth, my importance, my significance? And you already can see which angle you are tilting towards. Another question I would like you to think about, and if you don't mind, just type in the chat if you feel vulnerable enough that you can share right now. That would be great. Mark, do you mind answering, whenever you had those burnouts, was it because you were just so satisfied with what you were doing, or you were trying to prove something?
No, I think as you're asking the question, and I know I answered before that I lost count of the number of times of burnout, so it's been repeated. I would say that it actually has changed, right? If I look back earlier in my career, it was about proving something. It was, it wasn't satisfying, if you will. It was just like, it felt like I had to go and I had to go and I had to go. And I think some of it for me was some of that, like you were saying, some of the underlying, I needed that feedback mechanism, right? I needed people to tell me I was doing okay by having all of these meetings and doing all of these things and being overproductive. But as I think about later on in my career, I think there was more satisfaction, right? And it was more about, oh, I'm doing these things because I understand what they are. I think, though, as I said before in kind of the opening, I think sometimes the amount that we do just creeps up and up, and then we get to a point where like, oh shoot, I was getting benefit from them. I understood it. There were just a few too many. I finally reached a tipping point. So I think for me, it changed over my career as to how they occurred. Still, end result was the same, right? But how I got there a little bit different.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because remember the definition of the burnout is trying too hard not to be human, ignoring the signs of those feelings. And it doesn't matter whether you're going from obsession or harmonious passion. If you're burning out, that means you're still missing the signs. You're still not paying attention. The second question that I want you to ask is, do you feel compulsive need to work, or you're really able to disengage and enjoy other interests in life? I work with high achiever clients that are just like, I just can't, like, I cannot turn off my brain. I keep thinking, how do I disconnect when I'm laying in bed? How do I switch between work and home? And so these are the clear signs of that obsessive passion. What is it for you, Mark? And we have one comment here too.
Oh yeah, we do have one comment. Michael mentioned that he said my burnouts were trying to prove something, right? So kind of we're hearing some themes here for sure. For me, early on, I was not able to turn my brain off, right? It was just like constant. I think, again, I've gotten better at it. Actually, for me, I did, I can't tell you exactly when it happened, but at some point I figured out that was actually my signal of when I was getting to, or maybe a little bit past that burnout point, was when I couldn't sleep well. That was my sign. It's like, oh, I can't turn my brain off. It's telling me, okay, Mark, you got to slow down a little bit here. We've just got too many things rattling around in here. So it was just an indicator. But for the most part, I think I've got a handle on it now. Never perfect, but closer.
Yeah, and unfortunately, what about you guys? Unfortunately, I see too many people just say, glass of wine, sleeping pill, like, I gotta get going. I gotta just disconnect that and do whatever it takes for me to keep going the project. And these exactly things like sleeping pills and alcohol and God knows what else, the drugs of choice that eventually lead towards that burnout where we just cannot ignore the signals anymore. And then managers, leaders, what kind of passion do you think your employees are having? Think about your best players, those type A overachievers, the biggest earners in the company. Can you tell with an open heart that they're in harmony? Can you tell that they're actually not burning themselves out? And what are the signs there? So these are questions not only for you to reflect, but understand what is driving your team. How are they getting to be productive, to produce those results that impact the bottom line? And if they're burning themselves out, literally, then that's not a sustainable outcome. The turnover is up to 50%. They are going to start getting resentful, and that's where we're going to get next. So we have here Mauricio saying, would you like to read that?
Sure. And this is an interesting one, kind of it relates a little bit to what you're talking about as you introduced this, Oksana, but it says the separation between home and work is a critical one to avoid burnout. Right. He said now that most of us are working from home, this is very difficult. Any insights, right? That idea that where is work and where is home, they're, in the same space right now, unfortunately.
Absolutely. And Mauricio, to answer your question, yes, we will talk about it just later on. First of all, we want to understand the root of the problem, and it's really in our thinking. Because even when we worked from the offices, I've been doing it for 4 years. We're doing the pandemic since March. Even then, people had hard time separating work and life, separating work and family, separating work and their social time. And therefore, the root of the problem is in our head. How are we viewing and defining productivity? And so hang in there just for a second. We'll address what contributes to that. And then hopefully that will give you some toolkit to how to work with that. So I would like us to actually do a little exercise. So I want you guys to reflect on burnout signals, because so many times we actually don't pay attention to our feelings and the burnout. Oops, wrong screen. Don't pay attention to the burnout signals. And as a result, it creates the problem in us. And I would like us to, you know what, it completely close my files. Give me just a second. I'll find it. And so I want us to think about what are the emotions that get. So think about that fight mode. Think about right before you started to feel like you were burning out. Sometimes there's some kind of resentment. Sometimes there's some kind of like fight. There is definitely a lot of persistence. There's a lot of things that need to be addressed on a certain level. What are these emotions and feelings that you could single out for yourself and say, oh, okay, I'm on the verge of burnout? And I'll attempt to share my slide again so I can type in here. So think about the burnout signals as if like, well, if I pay attention to this, whenever you're in a fight mode, what are you feeling? Mark, what is that for you? And you guys, if you can start typing in chat. Resentment. For me, it was resentment. I was just start to be kind of like, why am I doing all the work? Why is it that I don't have a minute for myself? You know, a lot of adrenaline.
I think for me, it was a little bit of anxiousness, right? Like, oh, you know, I could feel it's like a lot of projecting forward. I've got all this stuff coming up and it's like, oh, so it started to build up. I also think that, as I heard you said, I think along the kind of the one you said, annoyed. Oftentimes I'd be annoyed with, you know, the situations, right? What's going on? A little bit with myself, but also the situation. Like, why am I having to deal with this? Why is this my problem, right? That type of feeling. We have a couple coming in. There's irritable, frustrated, short fuse.
Yes, and all of these are actually very strong emotions, and that is exactly what keeps us. That is exactly the energy that keeps us. Sorry, my screen is going all over. I'm not spelling it correctly. I'll do the spell check later. But that's exactly what gives us energy. If you think about that frustration, if you think about that anger, that's what on hormonal level fills us up, and that's why we're addicted to stress. Because what happens is that we're using that as a fuel to keep going. But that is exactly the sign of stop. It's supposed to be a stop sign. When we start to be short fused, it meant in our body to be as a stop sign, but we take it as hit the gas pedal, especially in the work environment. For some reason, because it resonates in our body. Think about when you are angry or you have rage or you are frustrated, you are energized. You're kind of activated, mobilized, your brain is very sharp, you're focused, you just ready to punch through the walls if you need to. And so it's very counterintuitive to say, uh-oh, I need to stop, I need to pull back. So whenever we start creating that annoyance and resentment towards others, we start pointing fingers on the outside saying, you are not doing enough. I am already full in. I already invested all my time and energy and everything in here. And so why are you not doing? So it's outside focus, and we start to be resentful towards people that are not contributing to that degree. As a result, the crash will come. It always comes. It's inevitable. If we ignore the stress for too long, the crash will come. So then you get into what's called apathy or freeze mode. It just goes like a roller coaster and it goes down. What goes up goes down. So when you're in that freeze, when you're kind of like, I can't, I cannot move my toe anymore. Like my brain is on freeze, or people get sick. What are these emotions that you get when you're in the freeze and you shut off? Your system is just like, enough.
I think, and isn't, it's funny that as you ask the question, Oksana, we'll see what others come up with here. But that kind of freeze state for me is almost emptiness, right? It's like it goes from just such a high to, you said it's inevitable, right? That it comes crashing down. David said it feels numb, right? Some others said sadness, depression. I do think that sadness is one, right?
Well, absolutely. And remember the traffic jam? When it's so crowded on the road, the brain needs an offload. The brain, the nervous system, and so that emptiness, that numbness is that brain saying, you junked me so much, I'm going to hit pause and I'm going to get the trash out. And usually it's done either through the sickness or it's just, we all been there. Nervous system just freezes. You sleep for 18 hours and you just don't recharge. The system is on block and nothing, like not amount of coffee, not amount of alcohol, not amount of Red Bull gets you started. You just can't do it anymore. And so that is that traffic jam cleansing because we've been so packed, so full. The fight is fullness and there's just energy and there's so much fat. What else do we have there, Mark?
There's kind of fogginess or an inability to concentrate, right? I like the fogginess, Chelsea. That's a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's when we know we actually are hitting to the recharge point. And recharge point is where we're having the equilibrium. And we are actually, after that freeze, we actually get to engagement again. That is our chance to do things differently. This is our chance to kind of have the new sense of purpose, restart. And that's where the most valuable engagement comes in. So when you find this equilibrium between like you went into this fight flow mode, your body crashed, and then you go into engagement, what does engagement feels like? When do you know that you're actually really productive, but you're not burning yourself, that you're not crashing yourself? You're just running the marathon and your steady pace. How does that feel?
I'm just going to say that Jill added in for one of the ones in the freeze that actually a physical element of it is a headache for her headaches, right? So there's a physical element in that freeze space that, coming off of that engagement, it's like, oof, she drops into, having headaches, which is an interesting one. And Tamara's here saying in the next one in the engagement, she's like energetic, a feeling of, a flow, right? Being in a flow state. I would say that as I do that, it is getting that kind of flow state of, oh, this is where, where I wanted to be without the, stress part, productive.
So it's productive, but it's a different flavor of productive. That's what I want you guys to get right now is that there are different flavors of productive. There's productive obsessive and there are productive that is steady, that is enjoyable, that is rewarding intrinsically. And so that is what we need to train ourselves to get and understand. Anything else that we want to add here on engagement?
Yeah, inspired came up in this. So
yeah,
I think another one for me, and that one is hopeful. When you get there, it's like, oh, okay, here we go. Yeah, it says that someone wrote in satisfaction at the end of the day, really aligned.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want you guys to think about that every day when we are not aware of our feelings, we're not aware of being human, when we are missing all the signs, we're in the giant swing between the freeze and the fight. We're constantly fighting, freezing, fighting, freezing, fighting, freezing. And it's like, stop, go, stop, go, stop, go. Like how productive that car is. You're ripping off the engine. Anybody who's a good driver will tell you that you're just gonna get the shorter life of the car. And so my goal today's webinar is to kind of get you into more of a flow. So you stop swinging and you get into the engagement zone and you stay there. And I found this graph, which is actually amazing, that is here. When we are operating in the business world, we are constantly in I can, I can't. It's in the doing zone of constantly I'm getting there, and then whenever the system spills, it just says, enough, and it's not even up to us. Like our brain fills up and it just shuts off, and then we go down into I can zone, and then once we feel a little bit of relief, we start pushing the gas again. And very few of us actually stay in the I am zone. I am feeling motivated. I am feeling well. I am feeling productive, energized, stable, coherent, flexible, adaptive. The majority of us are just between this irritation, frustration, and worry that I'm not doing enough, being angry and then being fearful, having a rage that, my boss is stupid or they're putting too much on me, and then panic that I'm gonna fail this project and my boss is gonna fire me. And this constant emotional instability for us as leaders, as well as our employees, that's what drives the burnout. It's just unproductive. It's stop and go all the time. So we want to drop into, how am I feeling every day? How am I starting my day? What is my mindset? What is my emotional state? What are my energy levels? And that's the zone that we constantly want to stay. And with that zone, you can run for infinity. You don't even need to retire. Yay for us overachievers. Why do we want retirement? Because we are looking for some release there in the future. If you're constantly satisfied with what you do and inspired, you don't want to retire ever. So here are some burnout questions for you that I want to guys to ask, is that are you, kind of pause for a second. Again, I'll stop sharing the screen for just a second. I want you to think about it. Are you regularly physically and emotionally exhausted? Whenever you find yourself into that depression, sadness, or rage, do you feel lack of energy? How often? Do you have trouble sleeping, concentrating? Do you worry excessively? Do you feel edgy, feel sad or hopeless? Like you, Mark, mentioned that hopelessness. These are your burnout markers. Asking yourself every week, not maybe every day is too much, but every week at least, where am I on this? How I am? Then are you more cynical, detached from the work project as usual? That means you're getting into that freeze mode. Do you no longer feel joy from the things you used to bring you joy at work? Are you less interested in socializing? Are you feeling less connected with people that you once did? Are you more negative than usual? Do you see the glass half empty? How are you viewing your employees, your colleagues? Are you actually excited to be with them on the project, or you're sick and tired of them? Because these are the signs that you're actually going the opposite direction of productivity. Some other questions for you. Are you feeling like you are not contributing anything meaningful like you did before? What is the meaning of your work? Is there a crisis of the meaning? A lot of us feel that sometimes, especially after some time in our career. Do you feel sense of ineffectiveness, and that all that you do, actually, you're not accomplishing anything? Like you are spending the time, but it doesn't feel like you are accomplishing things. Where are you guys at on that spectrum? And I want to kind of leave it as an open-ended question, so we get into solutions, and we have a good 15 minutes to go. So think about these questions weekly. It's not just today, it's your benchmark that we need to stay into this I can or I can't get into I am zone, that I am the most important unit into all the equations that we're putting in there. So what causes the burnout? And there are different, again, there are different studies, there are different theories for that, but the majority of it is actually heavy workloads. As managers, as bosses, as companies, right now, we are putting more pressure on people that we can handle. And we lost the common sense of what a heavy or light workload is. Because with the technology, we feel like we are all encompassing and can achieve everything. Job insecurity. In COVID right now, this is a very valid question that adds to stress. Frustrating work routines. I constantly hear about too many meetings, too much emails, don't have enough creativity in my workday, don't have space between the meetings. And then a lot of people, whether it's the companies themselves, the boss, the managers, but it's actually employees themselves, they cut restoration. My job, my company, Satvami, is to bring wellness breaks into the workday. People are skipping those because they feel guilty, they feel unproductive, and they are on purpose cutting that restoration that the company is willing and able to provide. Are you some of those? If your company say take a full lunch break, Don't email after work hours. Are you taking advantage of those? Because that's exactly what restores us, and that's exactly gives that break. And the formula for the burnout is actually whenever the company puts high resources and high demands. And the high demands not only comes from the company, but comes from us, our internal high demands, putting that pressure on ourselves first. And 64% of exhausted, burned out employees admitted that this was their formula. It was company gives great resources. And by the way, I'll define the high resources. What are the high resources? It's supervisor support. They're saying, whatever you need, John, whatever you need, Mark, I'll get you it. Rewards and recognitions. You are getting pay high. You have the bonuses. Your clients are loving you. And you're just have this productivity and efficiency at work. And you are putting all the time in. But then what is actually the optimal engagement there that we want to have is low demands, is low workload by the company, low bureaucracy of doing things. These are your meetings, these are your email, and then low to moderate demands on concentration and attention, just constantly pooling where we're spending our time by ourselves, not just from the company. And interesting here to know that whenever they studied optimally engaged employees, they said that 50%, this is the formula that they felt they had, versus the exhausted and burnout employees said that only 4% of them felt that they had this type of formula. Anything that you want to add, Mark? I see you're nodding.
Just again, as we go through this, it's just, hearing about, as you're saying it, like on how do you take lunch breaks? How do you introduce, time to just have some quiet time? I know that my wife recently started doing this where, she's very busy as an executive coach as well. And she actually schedules her lunch and forces herself to go outside. She put it even in her calendar, says, do lunch outside, and forces herself to do that to make sure that she gets out and does it. And I just, resonates with what you're saying here is how do we lower the demands, both of the workplace, but also of ourselves? Because I think you're right. I think a lot of us put the high demands come from internal, right? We're pushing ourselves. And I think we need to push ourselves to slow down a little bit.
Well, it's both internal and the companies. I have worked with companies that they have so much demands, and even though they add some kind of wellness initiatives or the program, the demand is so high that people don't even have time to take the time. So they offer it, but then it's like, oh, but you cannot follow through it. So it needs to be both. It needs to be the harmony.
And I think also it comes from leadership down, right? If the organization says, oh, hey, we want you to do this, but none of the leaders are doing it, you're sending a signal as a leader that, do as, essentially I'm telling you it's all right for you, but not for me, and people don't believe it, right?
Yeah,
you have to set up that structure.
What I do.
Right. Well, and it's crazy. I mean, I'm based out in the Silicon Valley in California, and there used to be a lot of people who measured their, the wellness, I'll use it in quotes, but the wellness of their company by how many people actually, how many cars were in the parking lot on the weekend. And, I found a long time ago that that's not a good productivity measure. It's quite the opposite, which is exactly what you're saying. Essentially, all that's doing is, stacking cars up on the highway. If they're all in the parking lot on the weekend because they need some time to, recharge. But the leaders often are the ones that are leading that expedition onto a parking lot of a freeway.
Absolutely. And I also heard, meditations, like people saying, oh, I'm meditating, but actually they're so overachieving that they're putting their phone, they're playing meditation while they're working so they can get the points on the app. So they meditated. I mean, this is the obsession we're talking about here. And I'm sure none of you guys are doing it here, but yet we're all here. And I'm sure there's something happening. So let's move on a little bit. So what's needed here? We need the high resources. That's a must. The companies must supply the overachievers, team players, absolutely with high resources, but we also need the acknowledgement. It needs to be enjoyable. It cannot swing into the direction of resentment. And as what it will get us there is more opportunities to recover from stress. Us personally, as well as company, that having that mental and emotional well-being on high pedestal, just like productivity, these two needs to stand together. I need to be productive and well. It cannot be separate anymore. Otherwise, that's the formula for disaster. And here there are a few suggestions that I wanted you guys to reevaluate of how is your company doing it? How are you doing it? Zero-based meeting calendar. What if we did not have the meetings? Get that as a base ground and eliminate all the meetings that, what's necessary, who is in there, what is the agenda, what is the frequency of the meetings. I was reading that it was where the average manager loses 2 days on emails and 1 day on meetings. Sorry, 1 day per week for emails and 2 days per week on meetings only. That is insanity. Like, reevaluate. Then we all will also, a lot of times companies spread out the good team players or A players. They're saying each A player gonna guide the team. Well, actually, what creates productivity is putting great stars and A players together so they can be that A player team and charge forward and not get anybody who's gonna slow them down. Instead of sprinkling them all around the company, team them up. Let them charge, let them get all the results that they can get, because they will feel intrinsic motivation. They're not going to feel like there's obligation. But what normal behavior is that we're going to be putting them in one team and in that team so they get the support. So hopefully their magic spreads through the ones that are not so engaged, and that slows down the players and the productivity. And as I said, the culture around the wellness and precious time, guarding your time and energy with your all resources, not accepting, learning how to say no, setting the boundaries, challenging your leaders. Do I really need to be in that meeting? Like, seriously, because right now we're imposed on so many meetings that it threatens our sense of autonomy. We're no longer feeling like we have our choices and being able to be productive. We're just following the grind. Everybody doing this, so I need to be in the meeting as well. So
yeah, I think if I can add on that a tiny bit, Oksana, but it's that, the meetings, some of what we, work with in the scaling up methodology with our members is those rhythms of communication. When you have known meeting times, right, where it's okay, your daily huddles or your weekly, then you can actually reduce the number of one-off onesie-twosie meetings. And we see it all the time where organizations, to your point, have so many meetings that people are losing days. But part of it is because people are all scheduling them on their own, right? It's like, oh, I'm going to get your time here and somebody else is going to do it over there. Whereas if you can get these rhythms set, to your point, how do you kind of carve out this precious time where you're like, you know what, every day we're going to touch base on our huddle quickly. And then once a week, we're going to bring things to, if people know when they are and where they are, then they can be freed up to not have to schedule all these other meetings and can say, hey, let's take that up in tomorrow's huddle or next week's weekly. They get out of that have to fill in everything with a meeting.
Absolutely. And that's why, adding the awareness to why you're doing it. People, I know you guys have such a hard time implementing those huddles, right? Like, people just they don't see the point. This is why. So you can save the time later. So you don't need to write emails. So you don't need to update. So you can reduce the number of meetings, and you're actually investing some time up front, but you're gaining your autonomy later, and you can choose your day versus doing it. So here's the formula for you guys to change. Whether you are a leader or for the teams, this is the formula to change that works anywhere, anytime. You need to get the new frame of mind. And that's what we've been doing today for an hour. We say, look at your burnout and your stress different. Look and definition of your productivity different. There are different types of productivity. There are different types of stress. Yes, there's energetic component, but there needs to be joy. There needs to be intrinsic motivation. There needs to be relaxation. There needs to be balance. It cannot be all go, 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 and then I crash. So this is kind of your rest, your time, your recovery is a need. It's not a luxury. It's not something that you can just skip because your body will burn out. That's a defense mechanism for the body. And then how do you get it? The trainings, the coaching, the programs, that's what we're doing right now. As a leader, if you can, as a leader, you must be able to do that. Insert the culture of wellness, insert the culture of self-care, insert the culture of productivity. Then in order to actually put it to life, we need to relate. We need to relate as human beings. We need to support one another. We need to have accountability. Yes, we can do many things by ourselves, but honestly, if any of you try to incorporate new habits, we're getting into December, January, where I'm like gonna be all this New Year resolution coming in. And so you know how hard it is. You know how much you quit. If you surround yourself by like-minded people, make your team. Make your colleagues, make your company be that. And you are the leader of change. You are the pioneer of the change. Suggest a new routine, suggest a new way of doing things. Talk to members that are experiencing similar problems in their lives. And then you have the new habits. It's all about repetition, 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 until it becomes who you are. Non-work activities, socializing, mindfulness, wellness breaks, relaxations, family time. You just keep it repeating till it becomes who you are. And then what's going to happen actually is that right now many of you got inspired and like, I'm going to do it. And then you know, you have this all information, and then as a result, in about a couple of days, maybe even a few hours, maybe a few weeks, you're going to start getting the old habits. You're going to forget everything that we talked about today. And there where the mindfulness comes in, where the repetition comes in, that's where the awareness comes in. And you need to literally choose different. You need to say, nope, I'm no longer going to be burned out. I'm no longer going to be stressed. I'm going to take a break right now. And it's counterintuitive. It's different. It's not what you're used to. And so whenever you feel yourself being uncomfortable with choosing something different, that's when you know you're changing, really. And so to support you guys, I'm going a little faster to make sure we have a few minutes. We actually, for Petra members, we did for New Year's, the Petra meditations. We're going to start in January. This is your time to reflect. This is your time to come and reset. Once a week for the business side, once a week for you personally as an individual, as a human being, for your team and for yourself. And so this is our support structure to you. It's free of charge for the Petra members. And then I personally and my company, Safami, we do these programs for employees for companies that are not Petra members as well. So reach out. We have so many resources to suggest and create for you. What is that you need help with? Is it you personally? Is it your team? But first of all, start thinking about this whole subject differently. So this is for me, everything that I wanted to share today. I'll leave like a few minutes for questions or suggestions or comments. Was it helpful?
Well, I got to say, Oksana, thank you very much. I think just the idea of talking about it is always a bright first step. Right. It's a lot of times I think people are wondering, how can we, you know, I hear this burnout thing or I hear stress, I get that, but we don't get a chance to talk about it, to have you come on and share with us some of your perspectives while working with some great organizations and people, to hear you share, you know, how you see it from your practice is amazing. I really liked, I'm going to add in here, there's some thank yous coming in, great presentation. I fully agree. I really like too what you were sharing, Oksana, about, you know, thinking about, you know, after you go through those kind of fight and freeze, and then you get to that kind of place where you go, okay, and you kind of come into that next phase. It's almost like those signals of being hopeful and in flow and all of those. If you think about the opposites of them, those are your signals, right? When I start to feel a little bit hopeless, and I'd say the early ones, like a little bit hopeless, I should almost get a trigger in my head. Oh, wait a sec, maybe. Or I'm starting to feel out of flow. I feel out of sorts. Oh, could this be stress coming on or burnout coming on? Okay, what do I need to do? To your point, do I need to, you know, stop, take a walk? Do I need to meditate and not cheat and put it on my phone? I like that. I've never done that, Oksana.
Absolutely. Now, anything that I guys can support you. I see my battery is like 1%. So.
Oh goodness, I think we lost Oksana. Well, thank you to all that came to join us. Oksana dropped off here. Really appreciate it. Great session. And if there's any resources or help you need from Petra, please go to petracoach.com. We're always happy to help, and we can get you connected to Oksana if you lost that. Thank you all. Have a great afternoon.